So let's start by talking a bit about the history of DJing. Where did it start? Who started it? And why? I'm not going to dive very deep into this because it's not that important, but it's always nice to know a little bit about where things come from. There's a bit of controversy about this. Some people claim that DJing started in Germany post-World War II, but another story I was told is that DJing actually started in France, in places called discotheques. Discotheque was the word to describe a place where the music was being played from disc, rather than being performed by a live band. That was the difference. And discs being records, of course. Usually those were 7-inch single records at the time, like the ones in jukeboxes. And if you happen to not know what a jukebox is, it was literally a box with a lot of records inside, and people could drop in a coin, select their favorite record, and that would be the next song being played in the club or the bar. But then the DJ, the person in charge of the music, was announcing the songs in between tracks, much like on the radio, and cheering up the crowd to create a nice atmosphere. There were a couple of famous discotheques at the time. This was the 50s and 60s. Like in Paris, the Whiskey A Go-Go. What's in a name, right? And for example, in London, Les Enfants Terribles. And it's funny that these both examples had female DJs who actually came up with the idea to install 2 turntables and operate them themselves. And one of these girls was so smart, Regine Zilberberg from Belgium actually. She worked at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and she started her own club later on in Paris, Chez Regine. And she was so smart, she so got marketing and hyping. There's a story that at some point one of her clubs in the south of France didn't do that well. She went there and locked the door for a month. And there was a sign outside that said, "Disco is full." There was a lot of music noise coming from inside the club. So people actually started thinking, we need to be there. We want to go to that club. And after a month, she opened the door again. Nobody knew what had been going on. The place was crowded that night. And that fired up the business for Regine Zilberberg there. So yeah, this really is not a man's world by any means, just so you know. So this was all in the 50s and 60s, like I said. But this was all in Europe. It didn't come to the United States until probably the early 60s. Clubs like Arthur and the Peppermint Lounge became very popular nightclubs in New York City. Peppermint Lounge, for example, had visitors like Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, and other kinds of celebrities and VIPs. So you can imagine if they were there, the place would be packed. And now I'm going to skip over a whole lot of history because to get to the point, the DJ, as we know him now, the person that the whole dance floor looks up to in anticipation and admiration, was born a lot later, in the 70s, because that's when disco happened.